I am, at best, the second most empathetic Pablo this audience is going to hear. At best. And we'll get to the backgrounds of you guys and your expertise in a second, but just Kerry, the decision to tell the story from the perspective of those who are giving, who are offering service, why was that decision made? Because I can imagine a world in which it's the other way around, and there's narrative power in that also.
I think the world is so fraught with so much that dispirits us at the moment. And we're yearning for hope, for signs of hope. And when I listen to the stories of Peter and Mary and their colleagues from across the country, it reminds me of the reason for hope. I can't imagine what this country would look like without the presence of the Catholic Church, and specifically Catholic Charities, which is a concrete manifestation of God's love and mercy. And so to kind of flip the script and have the spotlight on the one providing merciful care tenaciously, unapologetically, is just such a beautiful antidote to everything that dispirits our hearts in this moment.
Yeah, it was this almost spiritual palate cleanser.
Yes.
And only a few institutions, admittedly, make me feel that way these days. Another one of them is the Special Olympics, Tim. And so your background in that organization leading it, when you see something like this, what resonates with you? What seems familiar? What seems inspiring?
Well, the first thing that resonates with me is that I'm not an expert in empathy. The loudest laughter after that line came from my daughter right there. So you didn't bring your kids, but I made the mistake of bringing one of mine. And believe me, I'm going to pay for that all through Holy Week when she comes home and scoffs at me and makes fun of me in front of her siblings and my wife. So anyway, just disowning any credibility around this topic. You know what had struck me? Is a little bit the narrative that I felt in each one of these, but I didn't quite hear the way I hear it sometimes in Special Olympics. And it was that sometimes we think of these experiences, these beautiful narratives, as stories of services. Someone gave service to another. Services in the dandelion. There's faith, and there's love, and there's service. But service and services are different than healing the breach, than the connective tissue that comes from seeing the face of God in another human being, and therefore seeing it more clearly in yourself. And what we found in Special Olympics, we have, close to 1 million volunteers around the world every year. And if you talk to those volunteers, they almost to a person will tell you, they'll say, and I'm sure you hear this all the time, I came to help, but I got back more than I received. I got back more than I received. I mean, is that fair? All the time, right? So we have this a little bit distortion that these people you're seeing here are heroes because they give. I would say they're also heroes because they have the strength to receive. That they are willing to take in another human being. They're willing to cross a gap. They're willing to equalize, to remove the judgment. I think we heard this a couple of times. Like, removing judgment is healing the relationship, because most people that I heard about were coming from a position of lower status. And they encounter the Catholic Charities in voice, and their status is made equal. Yeah, they may need diapers, they may need food, they may need a bigger lunch. But before you know it, they found that they are on the same level. And that is liberating for the person who was giving the service. I like to say in the Special Olympics movement, it's a movement for people with intellectual challenges, but it's also a movement from them. One of our athletes, one of our sort of heroic athletes, a woman named Loretta Claiborne, who grew up in the housing projects of York, Pennsylvania, and became a runner and went on to run the Boston Marathon and finish in the top 100. And she was bullied in school and kicked out of everything and all that kind of stuff. And I had her actually in New Haven, Kerry. I had her up to give a talk to a Yale alumni gathering. And the talk was like a room like this of all, rich people. And I was like, I was going with her and I was going to introduce her. She was going to talk about her experience and try to convince all these wealthy, powerful people that people with intellectual disabilities could contribute, could add value, could be hired, deserve to be able to go to school. And she gets up and towards the end of the speech, she says, people say that I should, and people in my community should want to join you. And she said, but I want you to know, I think you should join us. Mm-hmm. Come into our world. And I was like, Loretta, that's not the script. We're trying to get money out of these people. But she was right. She was flipping she was quite clear that the world in which those people, us, and many of them are us, me, live in is not the world she wants to live in. She wants to live in the world where people meet each other, greet each other by name, where they don't see hierarchies, where they say to someone, if you need diapers, I'm going to stay here. Not because I'm being good to you, but because you're opening my eyes to the goodness in you.
Mm. We have a scientist on stage as well.
You can be an expert, that's right.
We have an actual expert, a credentialed expert. Abby, you study complex human emotions, you study altruism, and I think the vocabulary here is really important because it can get mushy, but we're getting specific in all of these ways, which is so again, welcome as we sort of get lost in like, what do words even mean? What is happening to us as we're watching these stories? Like scientifically, biologically, what can you tell us about ourselves in that regard?
Wow, a lot. First of all, brain is super complicated. So I study empathy in people who I call special populations. So ordinary people, but also people who seem to have been endowed with more or less than the usual amount of empathy for others. At the low end, I study people who are psychopathic, who don't seem to have as much empathy for other people naturally, but who, frankly, can be improved, and I think that's a really important goal. I also study people who have more than the usual amount of empathy and have done things like donate kidneys to strangers, rescue people from drowning or fires, do humanitarian aid work, et cetera. And what we found by studying the brains of these people using functional magnetic resonance imaging, brain imaging, is that especially when you are experiencing care for somebody else, so that feeling of intrinsically valuing their welfare, that, interestingly, is what leads us to empathize to start with, and it also is caused by empathy. It's a beautiful feedback loop when it gets going. And so the most powerful source of empathy is a single human being, because empathy is a one-on-one experience. You can't empathize with an abstraction. Talking about people as members of groups is actually much less helpful for eliciting empathy than thinking about individual human beings, which is why these videos are so brilliant. And I can see now why they were handing out tissues outside the door. I regret not taking any. When we see a single human being conveying an experience of profound emotion, what happens is that our brains actually start to simulate the state that they are feeling in the moment. If you could measure the brain, if they were, well, some of them are live right here, but if when two people are talking and one of them is communicating their emotions to the other one, the listener's brain starts to act in ways that resembles the speaker. And it creates like a profound bond and connection between people when that happens. It's one of those moments when you're feeling an empathic response to somebody, and when they're speaking, you almost feel like you know the next word that's going to come out of their mouth. That's because you're literally on a wavelength in that moment. Your brains have sort of created a superorganism. You've connected at the most deep and profound level.
Mm. One of the few lessons, this is a very inappropriate segue, one of the few lessons I learned from podcasting is fundamentally that we are, in this country, politically, sociologically, everywhere, institutionally, whether we know it or not, we're competing in a storytelling contest. And what is so great about this organization is that the stories, the hard part is what these humans decide to do. And so telling them on a human basis is clearly where there's such power. And I say this not merely abstractly, but specifically, Abby, about you. Could you please tell your story about how it is that you got interested in this research in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. So my interest in understanding empathy and how it leads people to care about others' welfare leads back to a night a long time ago now, I guess 30 years ago, when I was 19. And I was home from college for the summer, and I was driving back to my hometown of Tacoma, Washington, in my mom's SUV. And as I was crossing an overpass into Tacoma, a dog ran out in front of the car. And I don't know how it got in this overpass, but I did what a lot of people do when an animal appears in front of their car, which is you swerve to try to avoid it. And you probably know why you shouldn't do that, and I experienced it myself. Unfortunately, I hit the dog anyways. It was awful. And then the combination of that and the jerk of the wheel sent the car first fishtailing and then ultimately spinning in big, uncontrollable donuts across the freeway. It's a miracle I didn't hit anybody. Until the car came to a rest in the fast lane of the freeway on an overpass with no shoulders, facing backward into the oncoming traffic, and my engine died. And this was pre-cell phone, so I felt so alone. I didn't know what to do. I turned on my brights because the cars were coming sort of right over the crest of the freeway as they were approaching me, so they had barely any time to get out of the way. I could feel the car shake every time a semi rolled by. And ultimately, though, I knew that I couldn't get the car to turn back on. I didn't think that there was anything I was going to be able to do. I was going to die in that moment until I heard a knock on the passenger side window of the car, which was a little bit down because it was summer. And I turn and I see a man standing there. I don't remember much about what he looked like. I was 19. Everybody seems a million years old when you're 19. So was he 30? Was he 60? I have no idea. And it was dark. It was the middle of the night. I know he was a black man with a shaved head and a suit in my memory. But I think that's what I remember. But I definitely remember his voice, which is so warm and kind, and said, "You look like you could use some help." And I later learned that the only way he could have gotten to me was that within a fraction of a second of seeing my stranded car on the road, he must have pulled over to the opposite side of the freeway, run across 6 lanes of freeway traffic in the dark, in a suit, to my stranded car, knowing nothing about me, right, because my brights were shining into his face. Definitely risking his life in the process. And, so of course I replied, yes, I think I could. And the first thought was, oh no, it's my mom's car. Nobody else is supposed to drive my mom's car. And then, in emergencies, we're not always rational. Anyways, he's like, can I drive? I'm like, sure. And so I scooched into the passenger seat. He ran around the car into traffic again, got into the driver's seat, got the car turned back on, and then gunned the car back across the freeway behind his own car. And he looked at me, and I was like gray and sweaty and shaking. I said, "Are you going to be okay? Do you need me to follow you home?" And I said, no, I think I'll be okay. I'll be okay. And he's like, okay, you take care of yourself then. And out of the car he went, back into his own and off into the night. I don't know his name. I don't think I said thank you. I've never seen him since. But there's something about knowing that you owe your own life to the kindness and the compassion of a stranger that makes it real in a way that it never had felt real before that. And of course, a lot of scientists out there believe that that sort of thing is impossible, that it is not actually possible for humans to care about other people to the extent that they would sacrifice their own safety for a stranger. I don't believe that, obviously. And so the research I do now tries to figure out how it is possible.
If I was Oprah, I'd bring that man out right now.
I thought it was you.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this. Kerry, you have yourself this belief that human beings are, in fact, hardwired to be generous. And I'm curious what led you to this conviction, because this is a bit of a take in this era against this backdrop we've now laid out. Why do you feel that way?
Yes, I believe that generosity is humankind's birthright, and that we are all called to be generous and to inspire others to be generous, to be catalysts to inspire others to be generous. And it just makes sense to me. It makes sense of life. It is tremendously compelling when I see people behaving in right relationship with one another. And I think that generosity has an infectious quality to it. When you witness it, when you witness these stories, you want to be a better person. When I travel across the country and visit local Catholic Charities agencies, I see every single day hundreds of encounters like this. And it really calls in me to up my game in the generosity and goodness department. But it seems to me that this is an antidote to the temptation to despair. And that it's not just people are being served or rescued on a highway or cheered on in an athletic competition, but it's also those of us watching that happen are changed, and we want to be more generous. We want to be like Peter and Mary.
Tim, I'm a person on the internet, for better and for worse, largely for worse these days. It strikes me that as somebody who has been a leader of the Special Olympics, that there has been not just the coarseness in terms of how we relate to each other, which we've been sort of generally referring to, but in the case of the cause that you care about deeply, a specific reversion to, let's use some of the worst, most hurtful words. Yeah. Because actually that's what freedom is. Yeah. And I'm curious how you yourself remain resilient around the position that actually we might be fundamentally generous, we might be fundamentally people who are willing to help others. How do you manage that?
Well, I mean,
in this era?
look, I think we're living in a time when we refer to it in our work as a contempt industrial complex. And there's a massive business model designed around conflict entrepreneurs and outrage. And it's designed to make you devotionally angry, and it's designed to bring you back repeatedly. And some of it's done by bots, some of it's done by people. But it goes back to that, the old Cherokee story where you have the elder and the child, and the elder says to the child, you have within you a good wolf, and you have within you a bad wolf. And the child says, which is going to win? And the answer is the one you feed. So if most of us who live in the scrolling world are feeding ourselves, just like if you ate horrible food and you felt sick, you're consuming a diet of toxins. And so it inflames the bad wolf, if you will. So I agree with Kerry that we're hardwired for generosity, but we're also vulnerable to hatred and disdain and superiority and contempt and dehumanization. I mean, that's the story of what is religion supposed to do? What is this particular religious tradition designed to do? Is to awaken us. I mean, I think we're trying to awaken each other to the presence of God in each other. That, to me, like Karl Rahner said, the Christian of the future is going to be a mystic or there won't be a Christian at all. I think so in the face of leaders and others who want to use words like retard, is what you're referring to. My son, Caroline, my daughter's brother, started this campaign to, we called it spread the word, to end the word. Why? Because the word causes enormous pain. We didn't want to spread the word to make the word illegal. We didn't want to spread the word to cancel. Our community is not a cancel community. People with intellectual differences almost invariably want to strengthen their relationships with people. They don't want to cancel. So when people use the word, what we typically do is say, please come to the next Special Olympic local games. Just come visit. We're not here to, when you use it, just come see us. Come and we'll explain to you. We'll show you who we are, and hopefully you won't want to use it. You're free to use it. We're free to ask you to stop. If most people, when we started this campaign, for instance, I like to say we were asking people to solve a problem they don't know they have, which is hard in social movements. because people would use, I mean, I don't know about all of you, but I grew up using the word retard. It was something we just used. It was casual. And even I grew up in a family where people with intellectual disabilities were a central vocation. So it just, and then all of a sudden, when I heard the stories over and over again of the taunts and the ridicule and the humiliation, I was like, oh my God. So we wanted to awaken people that they could make a difference. What does the internet do? It awakens people to rewards them for more scorn. Ask any politician, many of you may be, the first answer will be, and I've spoken to a dozen governors on this topic, snark works. Scorn works, contempt works. So if Kerry's right, and I think she is, so too does generosity. But you have to incentivize it. We have to actually build communities and structures that so we're just, this is the most tolerant time in history and the most welcoming time in history for people with intellectual challenges. In 1968, when our movement was started, there were 200,000 people institutionalized in this country for life, having done nothing wrong. 200,000 behind 12-foot concrete walls for life. Today, those days are done. Our schools are largely open. I mean, we have 1,000 problems, but our schools are largely open. Community living is largely open. Employment is inching forward. So it's a hopeful time. The story we hear on the internet or on social media is, I think, a gross distortion of the country, which is why this is such an important. The story you listen to is the story you're going to think is what's really going on. And I think our community has been very resilient in saying, no, that's not the story of what's going on. The story of what's going on is seeing, a 12-year-old with Down syndrome run 100 meters and come in sixth and put her arms up in the air and have her mother scream and yell and cheer, and you're seeing human beauty.
One of the fundamental antidotes to the internet, and this is something that I think my parents told me immediately, is to go outside. It's funny how it takes a while to sink in sometimes. But the notion of what does it mean to be an ordinary person? Abby, it reminds me of your research into, I think, one of the most, profound sacrifices biologically a person can make, which is, I'm going to donate my organ. I'm going to donate my kidneys to someone else that I don't even know. What has your research taught you about what those people think they are doing and how they think of themselves?
Oh gosh, so I, like many people, had sort of the wrong impression of altruistic kidney donors before I actually started meeting them and working with them. And I've worked with probably hundreds at this point. It's been the honor and privilege of my career. And it's sort of easy to assume that somebody who would give a kidney to a stranger is sort of this beatific person who has never flipped anybody off in traffic or yelled when they were angry or done anything like that, and may even feel a little bit superior because of this extraordinary thing that they have done. And it is extraordinary. Only a few hundred people in the country give kidneys every year, even though there's about 100,000 people on the waiting list for a kidney right now. And end-stage renal failure ultimately is a fatal disease for people who have it if they don't get a donor kidney, and most of them don't. And the incredible thing is there's a cure. We know the cure. It works perfectly. It's just we don't have enough of the cures on the shelf because not that many people are willing to donate a kidney to a stranger, understandably. But when I started working with altruistic kidney donors, the first thing that struck me is in every other respect, they're just regular people. Every description under the sun, some are friendly, some are taciturn, every political persuasion, across the age span. But a couple things they have in common. The most extraordinary to me was how many of them came in a very kind way, saying that my research was a little wrong-headed. That I was looking for what made them special, right? I was looking in their brain for things that were unusual about them. And we did find a few. For example, a structure in the brain called the amygdala is larger in altruistic kidney donors than it is in typical people, and it's more responsive when other people are in distress. And this is the most densely interconnected region of the primate forebrain. It's connected to every other region of the brain. And what we believe based on our research is that when the amygdala detects that somebody else is in distress, it sends out signals to the rest of the brain to act. And the more strongly it responds, the more likely you are to act. So that makes sense. So there is a difference. But so many of the altruistic kidney donors came in saying, it's nice that you're doing this research. I'm very happy to help you, of course, because I'm a helpful person. But you're not going to find anything different about me. There isn't anything different about me. I'm just a regular person. I happen to have the right information at the right time. I'm not special. I'm not unique. And I kept hearing this from person after person after person. And finally, we ended up administering to them a scale that measures humility. And that revealed the most consistent personality trait difference between altruists and other people is that they are very humble. They genuinely do not believe that they are better than anybody else. They're not modest, right? Many of them have, quite wonderful accomplishments in their lives of all kinds, and they'll be honest about it. So it's not like they have a false modesty, oh, I'm nobody. But they don't think they're any more special than anybody else. And that makes perfect sense, because if you think you're the most special person, why would you want to share with the other special people, right? The special person should have all the goodies. But to a person, they genuinely think that they're just another person and they don't deserve a life that's any better or more worthy than anybody else. And so if they have 2 kidneys and there's somebody out there who's going to die without one, it makes perfect sense for them to share the wealth with the other person.
Kerry, if you look at the other side of the spectrum, I'm imagining critiques of this conversation, critiques of empathy, and it brings us to another popular online concept, which is that we are embracing victimhood. And I'm curious how you square that, the notion that, in fact, if you emphasize empathy too much, you are leading to a culture, perhaps, of something that is weak. And what is your reaction to just that sort of framework of discourse?
Oh, I think that is terrible thinking. And I think it is exactly contrary to Christianity. I mean, think of, we're in Lent right now. We know these 40 days of Lent and heading into the Triduum, the Paschal Mystery. Christians attest to out of suffering and death comes new life. And then we have 50 days of joyful celebration. So Christians get the proportions right. But think about what is at the center of our faith is the crucifixion, the suffering, crucifixion, and death of Jesus. To claim that we should not be empathetic in this moment of history is just absurd to me. We need more empathy, not less empathy. I think there was a study that we commissioned as part of the research for this, polling Americans, and 81% agreed strongly that we need more empathy in America, not less, and particularly in this moment of time.
As this enormous truck that you could charge lots of New York real estate square footage prices on, it seems, makes its way around the country and you meet people on the ground. Tim, I want to explain that rigor in terms of how we understand empathy, how we understand, you put it, the industrial complex around contempt. How on the other side of that ledger is another term that is familiar to anyone who grew up in this church, but I think we should explain as well, which is dignity. Yeah. And so how have you decided to visualize that?
Well, we started this project around trying to promote dignity, and we developed a scale, a measure, where you could grade an interaction between 2 people on a scale of 1 to 8. And we figured, well, let's see if we can actually create an inner map of how contempt operates and how it gets translated into words and how dignity operates. So we have a 1 to 8 scale, and then we normed and validated it more or less. We have inter-rater reliability on it. It's quite objective. You can score a speech of President Trump or President Biden. You can score the homily last Sunday. Most people use it to score their spouse or their partner. And as it turns out, many people use it to score themselves. because it's quite powerful, and this is maybe a little bit, Kerry, to your point, it's quite powerful to actually develop a language where you see yourself. And the index allows you to see, oh, when I called my daughter and I said X, that was a 3. Maybe I could have reframed it as a 5. I could have been more respectful of her dignity. I could have said, here's what I think, without attacking her or without whoever the person is. So it tries to remove the dehumanizing dimensions that creep into conflict. And so we just actually released a number. We released a poll this week, our first ever dignity barometer. And there's some really good news in it. 94% of Americans think we should treat each other with dignity. 37% of Americans think we do.
Wow.
So we call this the dignity gap. That's a big one, right? That's a chasm. So we have this aspiration, but we grade ourselves as falling short. And my conclusion is like, very few of us can probably solve the war in Iran right now, but we can solve the war at home. We can. Actually, the poll says it. People say, we can do this. And actually, truthfully, only we can do this. Only we can reduce the level of dehumanization in our culture. And it's going to take small steps, one at a time. It's going to feel inadequate. But we found, just one little piece on the research, we did some research on inclusive young kids. Kids who are more likely to be involved in Special Olympics in middle school and high school. We spent about 3 years doing this and then did some lit reviews on it. We found, they're more likely to be empathic. They're more likely to be able to take cognitive perspective. They're more likely to be courageous, unlike your donors. The includers are people who take chances because they see someone sitting by themselves and they're with their group and they get up and go. So they risk a little bit of their own social equity. They risk being called a name by going over and sitting at the special ed table or special ed lunch table. So they have, but they also start with a fundamental belief, I heard you say this, of dignity. You can measure this in kids. They start assuming everybody has dignity, inviolable dignity, right? That's the way we talk about it in the church, of course. So anyway, look, I think this ginormous truck, God, I've never seen a truck so big, is carrying not just these stories and a museum and narratives of hope, but it's carrying the story of people who are the includers of our time, who are the dignity ambassadors of our time. And we are starving for this. Last thing in the poll, and you can look at it on the website if you're interested, but the last thing in the poll is 87% of people rank affordability and the economy as the #1 issue. 84% rank our divisions in our country as the next. 84% of people say it's the second most important issue in the country. So we're at a turning point here. And where we end up is not certain. The outcome's not certain. If we continue to cascade down into contempt, more dehumanization, I think we'll see more violence, more families falling apart. My family has been racked by political and cultural divisiveness, torn apart, honestly. It's really painful. And we don't solve problems any longer because of this, because all we do is call each other names. So of course you can't solve problems when you have that. So anyway, the good news is people want to change. Maybe the equally good news is people see themselves as not living up to what they want. And maybe the best news of all is people are willing to try to do something different.
Yeah. If this was a podcast, we'd be in hour 1 of 5, maybe. Unfortunately, there's a very friendly divine clock on the biting by. And I just want to say to Abby, to Tim, to Catholic Charities, to Kerry, thank you for closing
Bravo.
the dignity gap just a little bit more tonight.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Great job.